G. Edward Griffin is our guest for the rest of the hour. I may even twist his arm and go a little bit into overdrive. I'm having too much fun. I like to have meet this guy in person after all these years. And Dr. Lynn Horowitz is going to be popping in for about 5 minutes today. Reverend Jeremiah Wright talked about his book about the engineering of AIDS, which we know is declassified, that and other classes of autoimmune viruses. It's kind of a cover for a whole host of things that are race-specific. My dad's a physician. He talked to medical doctors back in the 80s. He's like, son, it's a bioweapon. We all know it's almost impossible for whites to get it unless you've been taking heavy metal, based drugs. The inside, info is that this is I'm like, my dad's crazy. I'm thinking when I'm, a little, teenager, and then it all turned out to be true. They knew back then. It was just knowledge. My dad wasn't even into this stuff. It was just common knowledge. He's going to pop in for 5 minutes today, and then he'll be with us for an hour tomorrow. G. Edward Griffin is our guest. Continuing with what you were talking about when I said, is this engineered, or is this happening just because there's such bad managers?
Well, I think that the people who make the policy decisions at the Federal Reserve level, okay, and above, by the way, Federal Reserve is, I think your listeners probably know this, the Federal Reserve is not a government agency, it's a cartel, it's a banking cartel. And Bernanke and all the people on the board of directors of the Federal Reserve, they're not really at the top of the pinnacle of this the structure.
They're not the private shareholders.
They're not the private shareholders. They're not the ones that make the decisions, but they make the minor decisions. They execute the major ones. So somebody has told them at the banking level that they want to do whatever is best for the interest of the banks. Now, they don't want to kill the golden goose that lays the egg, so they would like to see the American economy as prosperous as possible, as long as the interests of the banks come first. And I've always said that whenever there was a direct conflict between the interests of the banks and the interests of the nation, you can be sure that the decisions would be made in favor of the banks. Now we're beginning to see that unfold, where almost anybody can see it. And so the point of all that is that they have known from the very beginning, back when this thing was formed in 1913, that somewhere down the line, pushing the interests of the banks ahead of the interests of the people was going to have a consequence, and that was the consequence of inflating the money supply. And that would lead to inflation. That would lead eventually to the destruction of the American monetary unit, the Federal Reserve note, and somewhere down the line they knew that the price would have to be paid for that. No, that doesn't mean they wanted to see it happen. That doesn't mean they accelerated it or anything like that. But they have known it was going to happen.
Well, even, I keep mentioning these articles, but even the Sunday Times of London, there's Neocon, but the Financial Times of London, which is pretty open about what they're doing, had the headline that big central banks stand to gain from subprime crisis, and they admit that they're getting all this government money that inflates our money, but they're getting it for free, and then they're going in and buying up their competition. So they reduced the regulations in the 90s. They flooded everything with cheap liquidity, and now they're picking up all the real assets.
Oh, right, and they're picking it up not with their own money, but with taxpayers' money.
Exactly.
So that's the hidden part that people miss, because one of the purposes of the Federal Reserve, and the same thing with the Bank of England and the central banks in the other countries of the world, is to make this partnership between the banks and the government, so that when the banks needed to be bailed out, the government would step in as a partner and use taxpayers' money to bail out the banks, to bail out their bad investment decisions, and they would sell it to the people as though this was somehow in the interest of the economy. This was preserving the economy. This was protecting the people. And that's what we see unfolding today. But back to the other thing, which is what they expect to see happen at the end of this game. They have known that the economy was going to melt down at some point. So what are they going to do about it? Just wait and then see if they can survive the chaos? No, these people are too smart for that.
They want to be in control of the implosion.
They want to be in control of the implosion.
Stay there. We've got a break. For listeners listening to the InfoWars streams, we're going to continue during the break, and we'll be right back on the other side. We're going to get into the election, the staged election, G. Edward Griffin's take on that, some of the new books and videos he's got out, as well as his classic, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and your phone calls and a lot of solutions. Stay with us. G. Edward Griffin is our guest, author of Creature from Jekyll Island. He's got a lot of different websites. One of them is freedom-force.org, freedom-force.org, and we've got a link at the top of the main page of Infowars.com. We'll tell you about some more of his great sites. Filmmaker. A lot of you woke up to the New World Order because of G. Edward Griffin. You don't know it. Some other author, some other person woke you up, but you don't know that he woke them up. That's how these ripples in a pond happen. And it's the guy that was there, 20, 30, 40, I guess now 48 years ago when you got started, there throwing rocks in the pond. There are very few people. Before we get back to the economy, then the election, and then real solutions, who are some of the other icons? I mean, who do you think of as real icons? Who else was around when you were doing what you were doing? And who were some mentors that woke G. Edward Griffin up?
Well, there are two names that come to mind. One probably nobody ever heard of today, and that was Dan Smoot. Dan Smoot was
the Smoot Report.
The Smoot Report. Well, you heard of it then, yes. Dan Smoot was a little guy. He used to work for the FBI, and he quit his job because he didn't think that his work for the FBI was constructive enough, and he became a communicator. And he put out the Dan Smoot Report, and he had a television program very similar to what you're doing here, Alex, except in those days it was all filmed on 16-millimeter film in a place in Texas somewhere. Anyway, Dan Smoot was one of the great mentors for me. And I remember one time thinking, as I was reading Dan Smoot Report, thinking, I wish I could write like that, with such clarity of thought, with no garbage in it, right to the point and very succinct. So Dan Smoot. Another one that is more controversial figure would be Robert Welch. He was the founder of the John Birch Society.
I don't know why it was controversial.
Well, he was controversial because most people think that he was a kook. He was a real nut.
Oh, how dare him think that there's big banks financing the communists, which is now all declassified. Yeah. I mean, on History Channel, they admit the CIA put Mao in now.
Yeah. Well, back in the 60s and 70s, of course, Robert Welch was really anathema as far as the media is concerned. And, my friends and neighbors all thought that I was crazy for even associating with the guy, because they thought he was a kook. They weren't sure whether he was a fascist or a communist. Or what? An anti-Semite or a racist. They had all these words floating around. He was none of the above. He was a very intellectual person and a historian, and he had a profound impact on awakening me to awareness of the continuity between what is going on today and what has been going on throughout history. And without that continuity, it's really hard to understand fully the essence of what's going on. Those are the two figures that had a profound effect on me. I like your analysis, though, because we all are just like pebbles in a pond. And if we can attract somebody's attention to the pond and then they start throwing pebbles in, first thing you know, we got more and more and big waves.
Or we could be a bomb with a uranium bullet, a plutonium bullet being fired into the uranium, and then you have those, that interaction, and it's going critical right now. I want to get more into the economy, but do you agree that this is the biggest, exponential growth of awakening from the Matrix to liberty? I mean, it's just explosive. It's just unbelievable right now.
Alex, there's no question about it. This is approaching critical mass, and that pulls my mind back to a topic we were on track with a moment ago, which is what these guys are anticipating to happen down at the end of the line. And we were talking about the economy at that time, so let me address that.
Let's finish up with the economy.
Because what they expect to see is a collapse of the U.S. dollar. They've been expecting that for decades. And so right now they have unleashed Plan B, which is, their long-range goal is to get rid of the sovereignty of this nation, to literally get rid of the United States.
By the way, the Trilaterals in the 70s said they would first have, 3 global currencies, then merge those.
Yeah, so this is not a last-minute plan. And so now that the dollar is tanking, they're prepared to come on in the near future and say, aha, we have a solution for you folks. It'll be called the Amero. It'll be a new currency.
Dollarize the Americas, and together that'll get our credit back up, and then things can start moving. And then as soon as we accept that, then they turn the credit back on, and we think, oh, they fixed it.
They fixed it, yeah. So that will be a huge step to surrender our national sovereignty, so they will gain toward their ultimate goal. And we, if we're not careful, will be sold a bill of goods and be convinced that we've done a wonderful thing. So that's the answer. They do have a plan for everything, and that's not the end of the line either. Once the Amero or the regional currency is in place, then I would guess another 10, 15, 20 years perhaps, then finally they get rid of all of the regional currencies and merge them into a true international currency. And again, the process will be the same. The citizens of the world will be convinced that it was a step forward in their own best interest.
All of this. They own the currencies now. They get power and control. It's just they're going to another phase where they've got total global control, because there's still cracks in the facade where people can still escape. There's still black markets. This is a total scientific dictatorship, the total managed economy, the final revolution, the monopoly of power that they're going for. Can you break that down for people?
Well, yes, again, you've said it so well, Alex, but my own take on it is that this process of collectivism, that's what we're talking about, this concentration of governmental and political and economic power in the hands of a few who are making the decisions supposedly in the name of the greater number, is for your own good, for the good of society.